Evening. Okay, my lovelies, welcome back to World Tutors Day, live on LinkedIn. Julia Silver in conversation with Emma Harper from Core Plus Tuition. Now, the first thing you need to know about Emma is she doesn't know how good she is, but the second thing you need to know is that's why we love her. So Emma and well, actually Odette first met Emma 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, and watching. No, not even.
October,
Was it
just
really?
gone. Yeah,
Well, it's all
less
a
than a year.
blur. It's all a blur. So we've watched you grow and flourish, and grow in confidence. And one of the things that repeatedly happens is this moment of like, oh, I know that. I can help other tutors know that, and that seems to be a moment in your journey. But you've kindly participated in, you contributed 2 sessions to the Free World Tutors Day CPD pack. One is about your journey from a teacher to a business owner. And the other is, I don't know, something really nerdy in maths I didn't even understand the title of, being an English primary person. So I think what's going to happen in this conversation is we're going to hear about your journey. We're going to hear about your passion for maths and enabling students who are struggling. But at the core, this conversation is going to be looking at that relationship of trust that happens between you and the families that you work with. I think it's also integral to your relationship with the tutors that you take on. And all of that is coming from this authenticity that I know of you, Emma. So I've sort of bigged you up, but in a really honest way, because tutoring lends itself to humble people, to kind people. That's what we're doing here. We're caring, and so let's see if we can explore the issues in a way that really resonates with our listeners and helps us each to find our own journey through those honest relationships. Emma, tell us your journey.
So I won't go into too much detail because it is in the CPD as well. So I don't want everyone to have to listen to it twice. But I have been tutoring on and off for 17 years since I was at school myself. I started tutoring while I was a student. And then I went into teaching. I was a teacher for 13 years, had a rocky journey, shall we say. And I finally left the classroom in December, just gone December 2023. I started Core Plus Tuition as it was back then in 2020 as Emma maths tutor and outgrew it quite quickly. I didn't have the foresight to name it something more generic. Um, it grew beyond me and beyond maths very, very quickly. And we now offer maths, English, and science. We work online, in person, and we do small groups in person as well. So yeah, that's how I've come to the point I'm at now.
So let's dig in and ask you, because I really want to get a sense of why Core Plus, what's special about it. So do you have a sense of what it is that's your USP, why parents not only wanted you for maths, but wanted you to find them a science and an English tutor that could support them as well?
Yeah, so at the beginning, I had no idea. I was just doing what felt natural to me. Um, and it's only through exploring with QT and in our conversations that I've realized what I'm doing and what my USP actually is, and now I can name it. And that is building the relationships around the family, um, and being honest and building the whole child, not just focusing on results. Because as great as results are, and we need them, and we need exams and all of that, there's more to it than that. There is the whole person, and I'm really passionate about it because I mean, I've always been passionate about it, but when I met my husband, um, he actually made that more of a thing for me because he failed all his GCSEs. And yet he has been so successful and is now a director of a company himself. And he never resat his GCSEs. He never resat them to pass them. Like he didn't need to because his skills are beyond those academics. So I really get it. I really understand it, that it's not just about grades. It's about making happy children, confident children, and resilient children.
I think what's so lovely is that you've got this role model. And I presume you point to parents and say, my husband's doing fine. It's not the only way, right? But
Yeah.
let's dial right back, because when you and I first had that conversation and pinpointed that, there was a specific student and you'd had that difficult conversation with the parents and said,
Yeah. So, in fact, since that time, I've had that conversation multiple times with parents. There have been some students that have come to us, they're currently on a grade 1, they want their pass, and for one reason or another, it's not going to happen, or it's not going to happen in the time frame that the education system wants it to happen. And I phoned up the first parent, and my anxiety went through the roof because of what I'd been through on my journey within teaching. I was expecting something horrific. I was expecting them to shout and scream at me and tell me that they'd wasted their money, and all of this was what I was expecting. And the parent just turned around and thanked me for telling them that their child was going to fail. And it took me aback. And when they explained why they were thanking me, it was because I was the first education professional who had been honest with them, who had told them what the real situation was. Whereas the messaging they'd been getting before was just, oh, if they keep working harder, they'll pass. If they keep working harder, they'll pass. No one had actually explained or broke it down or been honest. And that was, again, another sort of light bulb moment for me of that's another thing that's my USP. Part of my USP is that I am honest with parents. I'm not going to just be an exam machine. I want them to know the whole story and they can do with that what they want.
yeah, and that's immensely trustworthy. I've certainly had experiences myself where I've passed a student on to a different tutor because the specialism was not my specialism. And I have always felt so proud of those decisions, because that's when you know that the needs of the child really come first.
It's true integrity, isn't it?
It is
Mm.
integrity, and also it's that sense of connectedness. You know, I know somebody else who can help you, and abundance. There's more for there's enough for everyone. But what I want to know about that specific family is how's that student doing now? Um, what route did they take when you said this exam isn't gonna go the way you hoped? Probably.
They stayed with us. So that
Interesting.
child has sat the exam, um, but they've also stayed with us. So instead of stopping after the exam, they've continued with their tuition because we've made a plan around the child that we were just treating the exam like another mock. So they still had to take it seriously. I still wanted to know what they could really achieve on that day. But the plan is that they will then resit the exam properly in November. And hopefully by then we'll either be a lot closer or they will pass,
So
depending.
So what's so amazing about that is, firstly, one of the things that you must have been anxious about was losing the students, right? That first phone call, the parent should have said, well, stuff you then, right? But
Yeah,
actually what's happened is they just picked up the goalpost and moved it to somewhere more realistic.
yeah. It's about working together, not against each other. So if that child can't do it at that time, that's okay. Just because society tells us that's when they should set their GCSEs doesn't mean that's when it has to be. Um, but equally, they have to sit it. So it's then supporting that child through that process and using it so that it's still a valuable experience and it's not a waste of their time. and then building to something that's more realistic for them.
So there's so much wisdom in that point about making sure that the exam was meaningful, that it becomes, like you said, another mock, but it's worth doing and worth doing seriously, because you mustn't deflate the child, right? The journey is still building them up and building their confidence.
Yeah, and it's building that relationship and that trust in you, and as a three-way relationship, which is really tricky, that everybody trusts that what you're doing is going to be helpful, and building their confidence. That's the main thing that I want to do with my business, is build children up, because so many of our children are being broken down, that I want to do the opposite. I want to build them up. I want to build their confidence and their resilience for the real world. It's not always going to be easy, but if we can give them the tools that when it's not easy, they can deal with that, then I've done my job.
I think that really, really comes across, and especially because your subject is maths, the functional elements of maths are necessary regardless of the exam grade. Obviously, you need the functional skills to be able to unlock, for example, an apprenticeship, but you also need them to be able to manage their finances. And so there's a responsibility that you take on for the child. And it's often, to me, interesting that, there's no such thing as a coach without a tutor, being a tutor without being a coach anymore. There's no such thing as just focusing on the academics. We're always building up the whole child. And in maths, that correlation is so strong, because we know that maths anxiety can be crippling, and we know that it can be generational. Oh, my parents aren't maths people either. Okay, very nice, but you still need to be able to function in this world. And, you know, I often think about how many maths lessons children have in the week. And if they struggle with maths anxiety, it is an ongoing trauma that they go through. And you're there to be that wise person that says, maths is practically necessary for you, but the exam isn't the be all and end all.
Yeah, and I wish that the curriculum lent itself more to that,
Yeah.
more to teaching them the real stuff that
Yeah.
they need to know. Um, and that's a dream that I did. I won't go into the politics, but a politician knocked on my door the other day,
Oh no.
and he did get an explanation of how the curriculum needed to change. And
Did he stop listening to you? Did you get that face?
no, he did listen, to be fair to him, but it is something I'm passionate about, that the math, I love maths myself. I am a nerd. My CPD session was on factorizing quadratics.
Oh, is
Um,
that what it was?
I love I love maths for maths' sake. I love the joy of maths, but I also know that that's not for everybody. And I know that a lot of what's in the GCSE is probably not necessary for everybody. So there are things that need to change, but it's also about being honest with the student at that point and going, I know you're never going to need this ever again, but it's a means to an end at this point. However, when we get onto percentages, this is like everyday stuff. This is like what you're going to need. And it's perhaps conversations that we can have as a tutor that we couldn't have as a teacher, that I love, that I can be that honest with a student, that
I
I
love
can have those honest relationships.
I love that that's where you got to there, because I wanted to go back to that phone call again. And I hope this isn't triggering for you. It is slightly triggering for me. When you pick up the phone call as a school staff member and you are anticipating a difficult conversation. Now, to me, the minute you label a conversation difficult, you're already doomed, right? But there are so many of those difficult conversations that we have in unsafe contexts, as staff members, and so much of that you can alleviate in your current role. So could you talk about the culture and the approach of that, please?
So I feel like as a tutor, it comes back to that honesty. I can be honest in a way that I couldn't as a teacher. I can guide and almost coach the parents in a way that I couldn't as a teacher because it was beyond my role, or it was, oh, we shouldn't say that, or we shouldn't do this, and we shouldn't do that. Whereas I had a conversation with a parent the other day who was very anxious around her child who was completing tuition, was making progress, but he was lying down during his tutoring sessions, his online tutoring. So he was lying on the sofa with his laptop and engaging and making progress. I'll just emphasize that bit
We
again.
can all see where you're going here. Come on.
And I just said to the parent, very honestly, and said, but he's making progress. And she said, yes, he's doing better than the rest of his class. He's like made loads of progress. So what's wrong with him lying on the sofa and completing his tuition if that's how he feels comfortable and that's how he can engage? And the penny dropped with this parent, and she was like, oh, but he's not engaging. I said, but he is. He's learning. He's making progress. I said, let's pick our battles. I was quite blunt. Let's pick our battles. He's working. When you came to us, he wouldn't pick up a pen.
Oh,
And she was like, you're so right.
oh,
And that I could never have done that as a teacher. I could never have been that blunt for a start, but I could also don't have the flexibility to allow the child to lie down and do their learning. I don't have the flexibility for them to talk through their learning, because that was the other thing, is that she was worried he wasn't writing everything down. And we got to the point of, yes, but he has a scribe in the exam.
nice.
So actually, what he's doing with his tutor, who's an amazing tutor, what he's doing is practicing using a scribe.
Nice.
He's preparing himself for that exam in that way. And the mum was like, yeah, I
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah.
But we force them into a pigeonhole when they're in a classroom because we have to. We've got no choice. I'm not teacher bashing. I know how hard it is with a class of 34. You can't literally change your style to that extreme. We can as tutors. We can let them lie on the sofa if that's how they're going to work best. We can have them in a group, small group setting, if that's how they work best. But having that open and honest conversation with parents means that we can really know those students and really have the impact that we want to have.
So beautiful, and it's such a good example because each of those things feel wrong or rude, right? He's not doing the writing, he's not sitting up, and you think that, from the parent's point of view, who has been trained in compliance in a school context, they think that tutor's being disrespected, yeah, or something's not happening that's supposed to happen. And for you to have the freedom and the wisdom to be able to just take off those shoulds, which we often talk about here, and say this is irrelevant to our real goals, becomes really, really important. And of course, in a classroom context, there is so much in the classroom management that restricts us, but many teachers that you and I know understand that that child needs to be at the back because they rock on their chair and the kids in front couldn't cope with that, and that child needs to be on near the window because they need to be able to, all of these
Yeah.
things we do. In a way, it's almost that you have the opportunity to articulate to the parents the things that you would always naturally do. We always have in our minds, in a class of 30, how we manage each child slightly differently, or we should.
Yeah.
And so being able to have that opportunity to unpack it to the parents then becomes the asset. And what occurs to me from that is the proximity. The relationship between you and the parent is much, much closer because you don't have the school in between. You don't have policies and procedures. You don't have a school leader who, maybe pushing you or pulling you in different directions. And you can really, really stay very close to the needs of the student. So in that sense, there is on the one hand that freedom to be honest, but on the other hand that vulnerability, because the parent can sack you. You know, to put it really bluntly, the student doesn't have to come back next week. If you're in a year 8 classroom, the child is going to come back even if you do upset the parent. They're going to get fined otherwise, right? So you are in this precarious position where on the one hand, you have authority, but on the other hand, just as in any commercial context, you have to deliver for your clients.
But
Go on.
if they're not happy with what we're providing, then they're not my words out, they're not our ideal client, because our ideal client understands where we're coming from. They understand that our values aren't just the academics. They understand that we are trying to provide a space, a safe space for those students where they are comfortable learning. So if that parent had turned around to me and said, but I don't agree, he shouldn't be lying down, he shouldn't, and they disagreed with me, well, they then have a choice. They can either encourage their child to do it the way they want to do it, and we'll still engage with them, or they can find another tutor that will work in a slightly different way. And we all know from our conversations that we all work in different ways. We all have different expectations. And that's the beauty of tuition, because we now have a space where the child doesn't have to fit the teacher. The child can find a tutor that suits their needs and suits their learning style in a way that we can't do in schools. It's not possible. But the tuition industry has developed in a way that has created so much variety that there's so much choice, and it's amazing.
Yeah, I think that's so gorgeous. And I think you're coming from a place of such confidence to be able to say that. You should know that Odette's nodding away as you're talking because she's really proud to hear you say that. You know, if you don't love my approach, you'll find someone whose approach you do love. So go ahead and find them. But it occurs to me also that there is a journey that the parents go on. So you spoke about the parent who was anxious, and you're then in that role as an educator of supporting their parenting and showing them which battle to pick. And that becomes really interesting because you have this opportunity to actually guide the parent as well as the child.
Yeah, and that's one of my new projects, actually.
Oh,
If you don't mind me talking about it. I've actually set up a Facebook group called Parents Navigating School, and
yes,
it's going to be about helping parents see behind the closed doors and understand the policies and procedures. And yes, they might not be things we always agree with, but they're the things you have to deal with. And it's about helping them navigate those to get the most out of the education for their child.
that sounds like an immensely valuable Facebook group, and good for you. That is so cool. Um, you know, even as a former school leader and a person who engages with the education system every single day, as a parent, I always feel on the back foot. And the more they communicate, the less I follow. You know, I have 5 children, which means I'm on 55 WhatsApp groups and I get 400 newsletters, none of which I even open. And I know how important my children's education is, and I know how important parent engagement is. But I still struggle because I am constantly overwhelmed. So you have this opportunity as this trusted human from all these different perspectives of being able to debunk myths and clarify and reassure. And that becomes part of the process of supporting the education of the student.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing, is sometimes those things get in the way as a parent. They are overwhelming. I do have children that are in school now, only one that's in school, one that's about to go to school. But even now it's
Good luck to you, my
overwhelming.
darling.
It is overwhelming. And I know that. And that's why a lot of the time parents will come to me in the playground and they're like, what does this mean? What's going on? And I just thought, if I can create that safe space for parents to ask those questions, where They're not going to feel judged. They're not going to feel like they shouldn't ask. It's somewhere safe for them. Then that expands on what the work we're already doing at Core Plus.
I was accidentally muted. That sounds immensely valuable. So if somebody wanted to get involved in that, could you let us know how?
Yeah, so just on Facebook, just search for Parents Navigating School and join the group. Or there'll be a link on our website as well. If you go via coreplustuition.com, you'll be able to find the link to the group there.
Fantastic. So this is what I'm going to say to wrap up, Emma, because you're always so generous with your journey and your experience. But what I'm seeing now is that you've got this real family approach. So supporting the parents, supporting the students, and I know you've got some ideas up your sleeves about how to support tutors as well. And for me, and you've heard me say this umpteen times before, that's when you sort of go to this transcendent level. So it was actually inspired by a podcast that you did, Emma. When we're in the classroom and we struggle, we're like the canaries who are suffocating in the toxic air, and many of us can thrive in that space, and good luck to them. But those of them like you and I who don't thrive in that space needed to leave, and many of us didn't leave before we crashed, and many of us needed to sweep ourselves up more than once, more than twice, pick ourselves up out of our own ashes and reinvent ourselves. And many of the people who are listening to this session have been through that journey. But there is a stage beyond that, and that's what really interests me. There's a stage where you become a dove. So you go from being a canary to being a phoenix to being a dove. And that dove is the one that points to better ways, that gives hope to the entire system. So if you think about who we are in this space and how we are supporting the people who are working in education at the moment, we're the people who are pointing to better, gentler ways. And that's an awesome privilege. It's a privilege and a responsibility to stay honest and to stay gentle and to stay hopeful, and to really start building this nuanced, varied approach to education that is much more conducive to raising happy, healthy humans. So Emma is, I believe, in my book. Emma, are you in my book?
I don't think so.
I would have asked your permission if you were. You're not in my book, but you have. I think you will love my book because it speaks to this journey and helps along the way. And I'm looking forward to sharing it with you because I really know that we've all been pushing this profession forward, raising standards and deepening our connections with each other, and really building this sense of honesty and trustworthiness in a profession that to date has not been trusted and possibly has not been trustworthy. So for us to sort of up our game and be proactive and be part of something that is genuine and hopeful is really exciting. So Emma, thank you for joining this journey with us.
Thank you.
Happy World Tutors Day. Thank you
That's
so
good.
much for your contributions to the World Tutors Day CPD pack, which Odette will put a link in the thing right now. It's already in there, Emma. And I will see you guys for our final session of the day at 3:00, when we'll be talking to Rachel Vecht about positive parenting. And that's going to be another one of these, like, let's just make change together conversations. Thanks again, Emma, for all you do. Lots of love.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.